Hamkufanya hesabu ama ni nyinyi ndio wale mlienda na calculator kwa exam room? Why am I bringing that? And by the way, it's a serious matter. Have you seen what is... Okay, I may get into the details of this, but let me just give you the picture why I wanted to bring that. It is because they first deduct the debt from the total budget. Mnanielewa? They first deduct the amount they are paying for debt, then they say, now of all this total education you have given 28 billion. Are you seeing why it is important for us to understand the national interest? Because that debt is a budget away from what they consider to be the Kenyan budget. That is money given to other people that you must pay as a priority, where they say now it is Article 203, 1A. They say now, instead of national interest, it is B, which now they are bringing to be number one. Tunaelewana? The very reason why you have to be very critical and clear on what the national interest is, so that you ring-fence those resources which are meant to help you actualize those national interests. Are we together? My brother and ambassador, with your vast knowledge on the subject matter, and even starting with the areas I mentioned, please elaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Boaz. I think my colleagues have finished what I want to say. In my view, you have emphasized that in the Constitution, priority number one is the national interest. I think you are clear. It's number one. Unfortunately, that national interest is not defined and debated. I thank Uraia for wanting to work with NIT to assist us define that national interest, because it's not defined. That's where the issue is. I think the challenge, my view, of Gen Z, including my own grandchildren, is that this so-called national interest is not clear in their mind. It's not very clear. What is it? I think there's a young man who came here. His name, I think, is Palma. Palma. Where? Are you around?
No, he's gone to now.
No, he's gone. I think he belongs to the generation, my grandchildren generation. In the way I saw him, he belongs to that generation. I think. So we have got, he may not realize, but we have a lot of things in common. You see, he sang a song using your generation, your, what do you call this language? Yeah, that language, but the song was Pan-African. See, is it Cheng? But the song itself, the spirit of the song was Pan-African.
Yes.
That's what we sang in 1961 when we were creating the African Union. I was telling your boss, Oliver, to sing that song, but it was sung in Lingala, Oh Africa. Same song, 60 years ago, reproduced by the same, this young generation, by the same spirit, linking or bringing out Utu, the Africanness of the African. That's what Utu is. You see? So there's no real difference between me and them, only that your language is slightly different, but the spirit is exactly anchored. So what is Utu? And in defining that Utu, is where we're saying we must now locate that Utu in the national interest of Africa and Kenya. Let me ask you a simple question here. Every time we have a function in Kenya, official function, we normally sing two national anthems. Myself and Mushai, where she's around, we always argue between me and her, which is the priority, the national anthem or the preamble to the Constitution. It's an academic. But today, she didn't want to set the argument, so she began with the preamble. So I don't. We always sing two national anthems. The Kenyan national anthem and the East African national anthem. I always ask him and her and Oliver, why don't we sing the African national anthem? Why do we leave it out? Why? We have it. It was composed by a Kenyan, approved by the heads of state. It's part of the constitutive act of the African Union. Why do we leave it out? And the reason we leave it out is because the powers that control Kenya don't want that national anthem emphasized among the Genesis of Kenya, because if they emphasize it, very quickly the Genesis of Africa will just join and think the same. So ask yourself from today, why are you not singing the African national anthem, part of the Constitutive Act, created by a Kenyan, completed all Africa, and approved by the heads of state? Where do you ever sing it? Have you ever wondered? Yeah, well, that's just for your thoughts. Let me just quickly finalize about this national anthem, because I don't want to go through the complications. These guys are academics. But I think there's, most of you are in touch, there's an intellectual, I think Lord Acton, you say it. Nations, all nations have permanent national interests, but not permanent friends. But they are permanent national, all nations, including Kenya. So there's no problem, there's no embarrassment that Kenya should state that their priority will be the national interest. Because nations have permanent national interests. The question that you should ask yourself, what are those permanent, non-negotiable Kenyan national interests? What are they? If you don't know, you'll be fighting every day. And I tell my Gen Z, and including my house, if you do not have in your clear mind, even here in the house, you will begin fighting. So your first priority is make sure those are clear. Let me give you two examples so I see. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about America or China or Russia. If you go to any school in China, university, military, the Chinese national interests are taught to all kids. It doesn't matter whether you're a scientist, liberal science, you're a lawyer, engineer, the national interests are taught to all the kids. And one of them, just an example, one of them, every Chinese is told that in China, we shall never allow in China the humiliation of China that occurred for 100 years between 1849 and 1949. That shall not be allowed in China. Every child is taught it's a non-negotiable Chinese national interest. Correct? Everybody is taught. They're all scientists. They can be here building. You know, they are building now. But if it's a Chinese, he was taught in school that the Chinese national interest, the Chinese will not be humiliated like they were 100 years ago. If you ask an American, they can fight, but they will tell you the American national interest is the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. That is not negotiable. If you go to any Russian, he will tell you, for Russia, you can do whatever you want, but we will not allow NATO to move east beyond this line. Nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with economics. That is the national interest of China. Everybody will tell you. they will not disagree on that one. They will disagree on issues where you are voting left, where you are voting right, whether you're voting Republican, but they will not disagree on the Monroe Doctrine. What is the national interest of Kenya, which is non-negotiable to you and the children? That's what Gen Z must agree. And therefore, I'm very happy that the Uraia are partnering with us to actually initiate across Kenya a discussion and a clarification of all of us what those national interests are. If they are clear, you have no problem. If they are not clear, you'll be fighting every day because you are not clear. Am I making sense? Yes. I don't think there's anything else I can say.
Thank you.
Maybe just 1 more minute before I say, because I'm sure I'm not coming back again.
I know I'll call you back, but finish that.
Yeah, this is important. When you are clear, I wish that young man was here, I don't know where he went, but I think most of you are that generation. When you are clear what those national interests are, nobody's going to confuse you. Then your next item will to align those national interests with the Constitution. Once you align your national into the Constitution, the next item is to align all your national policies, all of them, your national interest. So they align. And when all the national policies are aligned to the national interest and the Constitution, then you align them in your budget allocation. So 4, national interest, the Constitution, national policy, and the budget. Those 4 are aligned. Then you have no problem. One more last question. You're now talking about civic education. I think Uraia is about civic education. Civic education. My assumption is that national education, as part of your national interest, will be the bigger part of civic education, which will be a component part of education. In other words, civic education can not be there, and the national education here, and they are not linked. Yeah, you cannot have a national civic education and a national education operating in different spheres. So why should we have national civic education, which is not an integral part of the national education of the public in line with the national interest?
Thank you, Ambassador. Just take your seat. There could be a question coming your way, because I also want to open this up. And there's a caution is giving. I want to ask you for comments, but there's a caution is giving. Avoiding confusion. We can avoid the confusion because at times, if you have not defined, you can be confused by many characters. For example, the ruling political elite. They will package something for you and convince you that it is the national interest, and you'll fall for it. Tunaelewana hapo? I don't have to give examples. The interpretation the judiciary will give would help them further their own interests packaged and delivered as your national interest. Tunaelewana hapo? I don't have to repeat that, isn't it? There could be also situations when, within this country, we celebrate diversity, isn't it? In the preamble, there was that recitation about it. So when that comes in, you must be very clear that whoever else is defining as your national interest, if it is not what you, as the sovereign citizens, of this country have discussed